Pray for me trying to edit this video after this, okay? That's how like I just talked and rambled about a whole bunch of nothing that didn't make any sense. Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about all things Onyx Storm. I have had a few days to mull it over as I finished the book on Friday. And I feel like I'm finally ready to talk about it. So grab your favorite drink. I have a cup of coffee here. And let's get into it. Also going to apologize ahead of time. This video is mirrored, so all the titles that you see behind me, as well as my book, are going to be backwards. I apologize. It just is what it is, okay? Anyway, like I said, I did finish Onyx Storm on Friday. And what's funny enough is that actually Onyx Storm is the first book that I tabbed, that I actually highlighted and tabbed. I never thought I would be that girl that would tab and highlight her book, but here we are, and I actually really enjoyed it. So I don't know if it's going to be something I do for every book I read, but I think definitely for like series where you're looking for clues as you read from book to book, I can see myself doing this in the future. I do want to preface and say that I do think and agree with the sentiment that the Fourth Wing or the Empyrean series is something that we sort of, as a group, overanalyze. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but for the sake of today's video, I'm just going to go over in a high level everything that I'm thinking, theories that I'm thinking, clues that I saw in this book, and everything that's like sort of connecting in my brain. But I don't want to go into it so in-depthly that I pick it apart to death. I think we're all doing that online. So anyway, with that being said, I did write everything down because I already knew that I was going to get confused and jumbled, especially as I went through everything that's going on in my brain. So if you see me looking down, it's because I'm looking at my notes. First off, I want to say I feel like Onyx Storm got a lot of different reviews, but I think that Onyx Storm was like a really big transitional book for the series and for Rebecca's writing. I don't think anything will ever compare to the feeling that Fourth Wing gave all of us, but I will say in terms of complexity of where this story is going, I think Onyx Storm did a really good job of like keeping us all on point, like not confusing us with so many names, so many islands, so many places that we're going in this book, while also still sticking to plot and keeping us sort of engaged on where the story might be going. And I think Rebecca does such a good job of like laying eggs throughout her work, and like eggs that are so like blatant, but we do not see it until we get to the end. And then we have to go back and be like, oh my God, it was staring me straight in the face this whole time. I think she's really good at doing that. Anyway, let's get into it. So I think where I'm going to start off with this is saying that one of the biggest themes that we see in this entire series so far is the withholding and giving of knowledge. I feel like that's the biggest line I'm seeing so far in this series. Not only how Rebecca's giving us as the reader information, but how characters in the book are also giving and not giving information. I just want to preface by saying that because I think a lot of themes tie into power, control, and knowledge. Those are like the big overlying themes that I see. So we're going to start like chronologically. And again, I apologize if I kind of go off in tangents here, but I'm going to try my best. The first clue that I saw was page 43, where everyone who is blessed by Dune has silver hair. That is something that we learn in this book, because Violet's hair has been a huge theme in this series, but it's never been something that's like blatantly talked about. It's talked about in the sense of like Xaden loves her hair, or her hair is a huge reason why people identify her. But like no one else in the Sorrengail family has silver hair. Like no one else in the continent who she's seen has her same silver hair. And everyone in the Sorrengail family thinks that Violet has silver hair is because Lilith Sorrengail was sick when she was pregnant with Violet. So, but in this book, we're actually starting to see the reason possibly as to why Violet has silver hair. Theophane, I'm going to say her name wrong. Theophane, that's how I said in my head. She has silver hair. And so on page 43, we know that the lady who was guarding or like in front of Jack Barlow's cell had silver hair. And Violet is like stooped by that. Okay. So that was the first inkling. Then I was like, okay, silver hair is a very big thing. We're going to learn more about the silver hair in this book. Okay. Another clue that sort of tripped me up and is making me think about everything a little bit differently in this series is that on page 107, when Violet and Imogen are down in the cell talking to Jack, Jack says, "Power should be accessible to everyone strong enough to wield it, not just who they see fit. You conveniently see me as the villain, but you're bonded to two." So do Jack specifically, or do the Venin think that the real villains in this whole world are the dragons? Because essentially dragons hold tons of power, and they, as like humans, draw from that power. So it's the dragons that the Venin are really at war against, not people. Or like that's who the Venin, like if the Venin kill the dragons, they've succeeded, and they wouldn't really need to, like, they would obviously want to bring more people into their ranks, but like I don't even know if there would be a war if the dragons weren't there, if that makes sense, because Venin can obviously pull power from the ground. I think there's so much more about the Empyrean that we're going to find out in the last two books. There's so much information that we don't know about the Empyrean that I personally want to know about, but I also think will be important as it relates to finding a cure for Xaden, as well as like defeating Venin, essentially. And I think that's a really big clue that is like never talked about again, is that Jack sees dragons as like the real villain in the story. Another thing that I was thinking about during this whole time is that we keep going back between, obviously we were learning a lot more about Violet's dad. We learned his name, which is Asher, in this book. And then it keeps going, like as she's reading his notes and like journals to her as they travel through the islands, we're starting to go between Asher Sorengale and Asher Braxton. So this might be something that I've missed, and please let me know if I've overlooked it, but did they take is Lilith's surname Sorengale, or did Asher change his last name? That's something I want to know. Is it because he was a scribe and she was a writer, that like hierarchy of last names, they took her last name? Or would he be, like, would people outside of the continent know who he was if he kept his last name? I don't know. Something is itching at my brain here, that there's like so much more about Asher Sorengale that I want to know, that we have yet to learn. And I just feel like there's just something there. Okay. Page 205, the top note of chapter 24 is recovered unsent correspondence of General Lilith Sorengale. In this book, we're starting to see more verbiage around paths, like chosen paths. And in this note that I think she's probably sending to Asher, she says, "Now we can only hope that the bond between our daughters is strong enough to endure the paths that they have chosen." Okay, if you know any talk in this book as it relates to Dune, it's about choosing a path. Okay, now we're in the islands and we found the Irid. Okay, we found the Irid dragons. And I have questions about them because they are like preaching that they are like the dragons of peace, that they chose to separate themselves from the Empyrean on the continent because they did not like the way things were going. They maybe foresaw that things would probably be more destructive in the future, and that they were hoping that like civilization as humans would evolve to like not be such violent creatures. That's confusing to me, given that they were aware that Venin existed. Like, I don't understand that part, especially knowing that you left Andarna there, given the way that the Empyrean ran things on the continent, as well as understanding how Basgiath is, like as a war college. So I'm a little confused by the mentality of the Irids in that regard. So I just don't know how they like hoped for peace to come about when the Venin existed. And that they knew like this war was raging on the continent. That's a little confusing to me. I think they're super judgmental. I think immediately. Obviously things change as the book starts to get to the end, but I just think they're like super quick to judge like everything that's been happening with Andarna, Violet, and Terran on the continent in the war with the Venin on like a 10-minute interaction on the island. So that's my 2 cents. I do think things are going to come around, obviously. I think there's a lot about Irids that we don't know. There's a theory going around that they pull magic from the sky instead of the ground, which will be super interesting. Okay, I want to talk about, if you follow Laria here on YouTube or on TikTok, you will know that she had a really wonderful video talking about her theory about how it relates to Dune, how it relates to Xaden's soul, and how essentially he will be cured from the venom. I also want to pair that with page 435, where one of the priestesses at Dune's temple that they're protecting during the last and final attack, one of the priestesses says, "Do you use lye and the juice of manwasa flower on your hair as we do?" And Violet says, "No, like my hair just grows like this." Okay, and then the priestess says, "Either Dune protects us or we meet Malik as her worthy servants." And then Violet responds back saying, "Dune isn't going to appear and take up arms." And the priestess says, "Of course not. She sent you." What's the difference between the priestess having to dye her hair silver and Violet's hair naturally growing silver? Like, is it a difference of being blessed by Dune or being a priestess of Dune? That's a question. Do you have to be like, does Dune choose people? Like, does she bestow her grace on people? Is that going to be a difference? Like, are people chosen from Dune and others are not, essentially? That's a question I have. Because we also, on the same page, 436, we learn that Theophane was a priestess of Dune, and that's why her hair is silver. Okay. And then as it relates to Larry's theory, we learned that like Theophane is essentially unsavable because her entire soul has not only been corrupted by being venom, but also she's been essentially shunned by Dune. And so Dune being the goddess of war, we learn on page 495 that there's no goddess more wrathful than Dune, and that entering her temple will slice the soul from any attendant who has shunned her grace. So Theophane has essentially shattered her soul because she turned venom and turned her back on Dune. So again, I won't go into all of Larry's theory because it's a really, really like built out, jam-packed theory. And I think everyone should just go watch it on their own time. But I think she's got something there, especially with how this book ends. Violet essentially saving a small piece of Xaden's soul and them getting married. So Xaden essentially keeping the humanity of himself by giving that part of his soul to Dune, essentially, or pledging that part of his soul to Dune. So please go watch Larry's video if you have not already. Okay, I'm just going to go into a couple more small things. I'm going to say this wrong, but what the heck is Telidium? Okay, on page 455, the top note says, "As our largest province, Tirandor provides the most conscripts for our forces. However, the strength in Navarre isn't only found in Tirish soldiers, but also in the province's most valuable resource, Talidium. Losing it would doom Navarre." This is mentioned twice on this chapter, and I think the next chapter, because Xaden is essentially saying that they're not providing it anymore to Navarre. What is this? This is the only time we've heard of this substance. What is this? Does anyone know what this is? I tried Googling it. We don't know what it is. Another thing that one of my friends and I were talking about as we were reading this book is that we need more couples. Like, I want more romance outside of Xaden and Violet. I mean, obviously I will always stand Xaden and Violet, but I want more. Like, I want more love. And so I'm really excited that I think we're going to have Mira and Drake become a couple, and Dane and Sloane. I loved seeing the little inklings of like Sloane having a crush on Dane. Oh, I just loved it. And then finally at the very end, I think we're going to get Garrick and Imogen finally together. Another huge theme about this whole thing is balance. Everything in this world and magic is based on balance. And so there's this whole theme in Onyx Storm about how, like, since the first 6, there hasn't been this many powerful signets born in a generation until now. And I don't only think that's because venom are so powerful that powerful signets are coming to be able to fight the venom, but also because of balance. So Theophane is a storm wielder. That's her signet. And so Lilith's signet was also storms. We think that Theophane can wield lightning, but she's actually wielding storms the whole time. And so they balance each other out. That's my theory. And that's why I think we're actually going to find a lot more venom with signets that are similar to those of the writers. Okay, another thing. It's only mentioned once, but I'm super interested to see what Rebecca has in store for Dane. Does Dane have another signet? What's going on? He happens to have a lot of power based on Sloane using him as a siphon to help Mira survive. That's something I'm interested in. Bodhi's second signet is something that we're all questioning, as well as if he turned venom or Garrick turned venom. A lot of people think that it's Garrick. I think if he turned venom, it was because of him helping Imogen bring Quinn back. And I think he did it out of love. Same with Xaden. That's my theory. If it is Bodhi, I'm not sure. I mean, there's this whole thing about their brother, like Xaden's brother being the one that turned venom. You could take that as being Bodhi or Garrick, because I know Bodhi and Xaden are obviously cousins, so that would make sense as to be brothers. But Garrick and Xaden have been like best friends forever. So that is, I just have this inkling that like Bodhi doesn't really trust Violet for whatever reason. I don't know. There's something going on with Bodhi because he just is like rebelling against being second in line as Duke of Tyrrendor. And I just feel like Bodhi has been like sort of in the shadows this whole time. Bodhi just feels untrustworthy of people, in my opinion, towards the end. Like he didn't really feel like he trusted Violet. Page 507. Does Imogen have a third signet? What was that? The first book, we learned that she's really fast, which I think we all thought was a signet, which might not be a signet. Obviously, she can erase memories, which she's basically saving her and Dane from fire from a wyvern. Does she turn the shield into stone? Like, what's going on there? Okay, why did we get no map extension at the very end? I was really hoping the last map on the back of the book would be extended. So I'm trying to in my brain, I was thinking of Hawaii for all the islands. I don't know if that's what everyone was doing, but like they were almost like in a little chain because it's like volcanic islands essentially. And another question I have is how long, when did Eric manifest his signet? How much has he known what's going to happen? Like how long has he been sort of planning in the background of being prepared for all of this? In the third book, in the total of the third book? And has he secretly been planning this with Xaden? Like, has Xaden been involved even though they hate each other? Did Eric bring Xaden into the loop? There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on up in here. I've been watching a lot of videos. Again, I want to keep this as an open conversation. I don't want to overanalyze everything, but these are just all the thoughts that are going on in my head that I'm thinking about. Happy reading for everyone. Happy theorizing. Let me know your thoughts. I would really love to know them. And if you've seen any other theories that you think would be good to know, please shoot them my way. That is it for today. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.